So hello, welcome back to Decommission, the Serialization podcast. I'm Justin Ahdan, and I'm joined once again by my co-hosts Jerome Burton and Scott Pugh. Today, we turn our attention to a topic that continues to grow in relevance: artificial intelligence. Depending on who you ask, AI is either the next great leap forward for the industry or the latest buzzword wrapped in a layer of sales promises and technological mystique. In pharma supply chains, AI is increasingly being presented not just as a compliance tool, but as a way to enhance traceability, predictability, and operational insight. The promise is that by analyzing vast volumes of data, AI can help organizations anticipate disruptions, detect anomalies, and make better decisions across the supply chains. Pharmaceutical supply chains are complex ecosystems where visibility, trust, and timely decision-making are just as critical as regulatory adherence. But there is an important question that sits beneath all of this. Serialization systems and supply chain systems more broadly ultimately depend on the integrity of the data flowing through them. And as every technical person knows, even the most sophisticated algorithms cannot escape a simple rule: garbage in, garbage out. Which brings us back to something we discussed in our previous episode: standards. Standards are the shared language that allows systems to communicate, data to move reliably through the supply chain, and for trust to be established between partners. Without that common structure and discipline, even the most advanced artificial intelligence is simply analyzing inconsistency. So today, we're approaching AI in the same spirit we bring to every topic on Decommissioned, not with hype and not with skepticism for its own sake, but with curiosity and a sense of responsibility. Along with us three today, we're also welcoming perspectives from three technology providers working in the serialization and traceability space: Trust.med, SoftGroup, and AltiusHub.
Really show my appreciation to Dimitar, Abi, and John for agreeing to be on this podcast to speak freely and open about their thoughts, because I think at the end of the day, all this does is provides more value for the listeners, who are probably in many cases customers and end users. Because what you're doing here is you're seeing vendors collaborate and willing to work together. Which again, I think is just a very refreshing thing to see in this space. So again, thank you all for being a part of this. So I think, on the topic of AI and how we've sort of structured this podcast to go, what I'm going to do is somewhat fill the role, if you will, of an actual customer end user. Consider me to be, let's say, a manager of serialization, maybe a VP of supply chain at a pharma manufacturer, somebody who has, experience and background and knowledge with serialization, because at my company, I'm tasked with making sure we're compliant with, could be US, EU, many other global regulations. And this topic of AI, I keep hearing about it. I keep seeing the marketing. I keep seeing a lot of posts about AI. And so I'm trying to figure out for myself and for my company, is this something that I really need to be looking deeply into, right? Is this something that is going to help solve a lot of the current problems I have in, my day-to-day serialization operations? Is this the type of thing where if I don't get on the bandwagon now, I might miss my chance and be very far behind the rest of the industry? So that's what those are the types of perspectives and views that I want to pose to our guests today as we go through this topic of AI, right? Is sort of share your thoughts and opinions, given the perspective of if you were speaking to, again, somebody like myself, maybe a manager of supply chain or a VP of serialization or supply chain. So maybe we'll start out with Dimitar. Can also give you guys a chance to do quick introductions as well, if you'd like, and then happy to maybe hear just some introductory thoughts about, the use and the role of AI in this space.
To say some words about me. Well, regarding the hot topic of AI in the pharma, we have evaluated a lot of solutions regarding the AI and serialization. And most the valuable solutions that we have found is that we can connect different systems. It's really easy using the AI to connect different systems. Actually, if you are in the role of serialization manager for a company, you actually have to manage the other systems that are connected to the track and trace. Yeah, you have to manage the ERP system, the MES system, maybe some kind of logistics systems also the laboratory system, the LIMS, also known as LIMS systems. All these systems provide different interfaces, and it requires a lot of manual effort just to synchronize all those systems. And this is one of the most interesting topics regarding the AI. AI agent can actually collect all this information from these different systems regarding can batch, can evaluate, can find any discrepancy, any issue within this data, and can identify. So it cannot judge instead of the you as a serialization manager, but it can be really helpful as identifying the issues that you might miss, for example. And it can analyze a lot of data really fast.
Thank you, Dimitar. So, I think a lot of what I heard in your feedback, right, is there's certainly a number of different applications where AI is certainly coming into use, potentially already in use. Again, as a manager of serialization in my day-to-day, the kind of things that I'm most worried about are things like, are my files getting out the door to my customers or to the government systems, right? I have challenges having to open support tickets with my vendor and waiting a long time to get feedback. I still seem to have problems, just getting good standards-based data in and out of my system. So when I see a lot of these marketing posts and let's be honest, I'm getting phone calls, it seems like every other day from the sales rep from my vendor saying, hey, you need to look at our latest module that starts to implement AI. Is that going to fix all of these problems that I'm having on a day-to-day basis, right? Or is this something that is still going to, take some time to work through and really become something that, becomes an invaluable tool as part of my serialization platform? I don't know, Abi, if you want to speak to that.
To go about it. What Dimitar was talking about is very valid, by the way, and it has a certain lens to it. The lens that I would categorize all those opinions would be use cases, right? And one can keep digging as many use cases as much as possible in the realm of serialization traceability. Why? Because the spectrum is very huge. The spectrum of supply chain, which begins from manufacturer to a 3PL, to a warehouse, to a distributor, to a retailer. There are no one set of operations that all of these categories follow, right? There are different types of event, there are different types of exceptional event, shop floor scenarios vary, business scenarios vary, shipment scenarios vary, geopolitical scenarios vary, due to which certain shipment scenarios also get affected. Everything is, it's unique in itself. If I could spend a quick 2 to 3 seconds introducing about what I am and what I do. So my company is AltiusHub, right? And before AltiusHub, my job has been pretty much to build and sell product to enterprise organizations. What that means is I would spend most of my time with a CEO, a COO, or a CIO, helping them to make sense of what a SaaS product, what value does it bring to them in the larger scheme of things. Now, this is what I do, right? Before going deep into the problem statement, first of all, I would think, what would customer want, right? We are very creative. Dimitar, with 20 years of your experience, Jerome, Scott, John, all of us, experts in our own domain. But what do customers exactly want? And that is something which I keep it at the top. Now, for any customer, for any manufacturer or someone dabbling in the realm of heavy volumes, intricate supply chain, two things matter: timing, efficiency. Both lead to monetary gains or monetary losses. right? And this is where, when I have had started to, begin these conversation with my customers as to what does AI mean to them from a traceability track and trace from domain, uh, there is a growing, inclination towards efficiency gains, and that is uh, the second lens. The first lens, what pretty much Dimitar was exploring, was different types of use cases, and if we, rightly deep dive into it, we can list out hundreds of them. Second perspective is the efficiency gains. Now, there are mixed reviews as to what AI can do for them. People are saying the early thought. I'll also share with that. A lot of customers who I met, they're asking me, "Oh, can you build AI workflows to, so that I can fire 10 of my people?" I was like, "No, hold on, that can't happen because these people are the ones who exactly know how things are happening." I'm talking about reducing the time of doing 10 steps of a certain action, right? Even right now in AltiusHub, we have built certain workflows, configurable workflows in which a user can enter by their own, by their own volition, all the supply chain parameters, shipment scenarios associated with them, automate the trigger, and rest is taken care of. Of course, the user sits on top of it to ensure that the workflows are working, the data gets exchanged, the EPCS file is accurate, even after, AltiusHub pretty much validates it. Ultimately, what I'm offering them is 5 steps, a shorter way of doing things. And with AI, those steps can be further reduced. So do it for me, an AI agent that does it for you. Uh, you know, uh, Dimitar had a very, very strong case in which he mentioned ecosystem of solutions, ERP system, MES solutions. In manufacturing realm, there are BRMS solutions, which are, very, very crucial. When traceability sits in such a complex realm, AI can help, sync up those data points accurately. AI can help sync up those data points faster. That is one, perspective. And ideal scenario, a user may sit for maybe a week or two to do it, but with the help of AI, and there are tools, by the way. I'm not just, doing ideation right now. I've been discussing with a lot of AI-based founders who have come up with AI-based tools, wherein you deploy, it sits on top of your applications. They find out ways to integrate it, and it's very seamless. This is where I'm coming from, where AI helps in getting things done for them, basis the expertise that the user have. They know precisely what kind of an output they want. They know precisely what kind of, shipment scenarios need to be covered, what exceptional scenarios need to be covered. It's just that instead of them sitting on top of a system which promises maybe 10 other people sitting in some offshore people masquerading in the form of an automated flow, it's just the product is doing it all for them, right? So that is one way. So do it for me. And the second lens, right, which I started exploring from an AI perspective is how to's. Now, all of us will agree, irrespective of the different solution offerings that we bring, is serialization and traceability is scientifically complex, right? Uh, Unfortunately, the knowledge of it has been deliberately hoarded by a few organizations, and which shouldn't be done. And that's what we are also, going against. We are sharing this knowledge, and we are helping our customers be more educated. AI can also do that. I'm already actively working on agents where, you know all the regulations are publicly available. You name it, Drug Supply Chain Security Act, there are 10 documents just from the, guidelines and deployment side of things. EUFMD, all documents are open, of course, provided the OPP partners have given you an approval. UAE, that means Saudi FDA, Brazil, and Visa, you name it, all these documents are available. And that is what AI's job is. AI's job is to consume this document like there is no end, and help the user to have access to every bit of that knowledge at their fingertips. And that's possible, right? So that is the good part of AI, what it can address, what it can do. Dimitar also mentioned one of the use cases where AI-based image capturing and all the information being captured out of that, which is happening in the industry as we speak, right? So these are all efficiency points. Now, the other part, the gimmicks of it, that we should also be wary of, which certain organizations use as per their own free will, you know, that that there are these AI agents that will, completely orchestrate or completely, simplify your entire ecosystem and, do certain magic for you. Now, uh, the only suggestion I would give here is uh, the customer must feel powerful. They should start questioning those vendors when they promise them, such and such fancy features. But because at the core of the product, the offering is simple. It's traceability, it's EPSAS file generation, it is data exchange, it is adherent to compliances. Traceability solution throughout the globe are a mandate, right? Customer must adhere to it. So it is given they will, they'll have to use it. So customer can start questioning these vendors, and that's when they'll start realizing, okay, are you just selling this AI to, do some sales magic, or is there a real use case out of it? So or if you ask me what I do, I deliberately engage in this conversation before the customers ask. I give them the onus that I have 10 questions. Would you like to ask those questions to me? And maybe you can build up on that. So it is a very early stage, to be frank, AI and traceability and how it will impact. The fact that we are all under the umbrella of regulations also make the adoption of AI quite tricky in this domain. It's not going to happen, in a speed that's happening all over the world. For that to happen, all the regulatory bodies need to be, on AI. EU FMD need to be on AI. USDS ESEN needs to come up with a AI-based implementation guidelines. UE Tatmi needs to have AI-based workflows, etc., which there is a fairly good amount of time. But before all that comes, I think conversation, deliberate discussing of this topic, deliberate discussing of the actual merits, the actual use cases, the actual efficiency and time saving that AI can bring. That is what I believe is something which you can do right now.
I appreciate that, Abhi. I think those are some great comments, and I'm going to touch upon, I think, a few things in particular that you raised, because again, just relating that back to, again, what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis, and having to just manage, the daily operations, as well as historically, having been involved in serialization and having gone through probably at least, I'd say, a couple, let's call them cycles now, of sort of new technology coming to, be heavily promoted, a lot of promises around the technology. Uh, again, as this mythical manager of serialization role that I'm playing, I can say that in the past, I spent money with my vendor to get certain modules that, quite honestly, I don't even know if they're still in use, right? I spent money on, for me in the US, I spent money on a VRS module that I don't really get that many verification requests. I'd say a big one that has me a bit hesitant as I look towards AI is the experience I went through with blockchain. So I don't know, John, from a Trust.med standpoint, how should I be viewing AI? Should I really be looking at it as just another blockchain situation, right? Or is this something again that is going to have some notable differences that ultimately are going to provide me value long term?
So Scott, hey John, sorry if I may just add one quick sentence, and that's a very beautiful point to make. And I just want to quickly mention this because this is precisely certain conversations where a lot of customers are doing. Complex technologies fail at enterprise scale. Let me repeat that. Complex technologies fail at enterprise scale. Blockchain is something which was there for traceability almost 10 to 12 years back. Walgreen was the pioneer in doing this. Walgreen still have blockchain-based traceability for their own supply chain operation. But, there's a beauty to EPCI standards. There's a merit to EPCI standard because it is simplified enough to be followed at a global level. So just that thought. Sorry, John, I interrupted you, but please.
No, Abby, that was great. Thank you. And Scott, that's a fantastic question. So I'm gonna build off of what Abiram said as well. So just a quick introduction to myself. My name's John Winkler. I am the CTO for Trust.med. Trust.med focuses on data movement, validation, and overall analyzation of the data that moves between the trading partners at all level throughout the pharmaceutical logistical supply chain. So to take a look at your question, kind of comparing blockchain to AI as modern buzzwords for the industry, it's a really great question. And when you take a look at it, ultimately to make something concise and bring to the point, I do think that there's a key core difference here, and that is blockchain. Like I said, is it's something that was deployed at an enterprise level, and that was really it. When you look at blockchain as a technology, there are some general consumer users that understand it, as a technology, and those are people who are, interested in, cryptocurrency or different types of wallets, or places where the blockchain affects, they're technical folk who enjoy that sort of thing. The general user, my mom is not going to know what blockchain is. My sister is not going to know what blockchain is. However, if I go to a family gathering and I talk about AI, they have a general understanding and idea behind what AI is, at least to the fact that, oh, I know ChatGPT, I can go talk to it and it can give me answers. That is a very specific, type of AI, and they have a very non-technical view of it. But the fact of the matter is, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, they've come and commercialized the idea of AI so that it is, a more common, household term. So I think for businesses and in the business case, it's a little different there. I don't believe that it's just going to disappear and go away, because the average person knows and understands at least a little bit about it and may or may not use it in their everyday life, whether they go to, a system like Claude or ChatGPT to get answers or to help with a development problem or things like that. Blockchain really didn't have that for people to go to. And it brings up a good point too, that there's different kinds of AI out there, right? AI is a very blanket term, and blockchain's very specific. Now, there's different uses for blockchain, sure, but AI has, there's more, but there's really four main types. You have your RAG models, your retrieval augmented generation, your predictive models that help determine where things are going, forecasting, things like that. You have analytical models that take a look at your data and make key evaluations on it, whether that might be is this good or is this bad? Are we short on something? Things like that. And then you've got things that are your agentic models, and this kind of has two different this also branches in two different ways. You have your agentic models where it's like this is the one that brings the fear, has a lot of fear mongering around it, right? This is the is it going to take my job sort of conversation that we had earlier. The agentic models are the ones that they're systems that are put in place to kind of automate manual or repeated tasks, utilizing information from external or internal systems, documentation, etc., to make the best decision that it possibly can make, and help, like I said, help kind of automate some of those manual tasks to make something that maybe took you an hour and multiple reviews. It takes that and turns it into a 5-minute conversation with this system, and you now have where you'd be after an hour of work a year ago. you can take that same kind of approach and inject it into, these platforms, so you can have systems that sit out there and go, hey, I'm John Smith, your internal, coordinator. How can I, what can I answer about your supply chain today? And you can ask it questions of, am I short in any products, or how is XYZ store doing? And maybe it has access to that information internally to provide you those answers. So there's a lot of really cool things, these, and that is, to steal a word from Abiram, that's more ideation there. Those are just thoughts that came across my head as we're talking here. But there's multiple different types of AI out there, or AI systems out there, and they're going to be utilized in different ways based off of the type of business that you're in and solution partner you're working with. From Trust.med's perspective, we're really looking at it from two kind of key points right now. Personally. We do a lot of forecasting based off of the reporting. Since we move the regulated EPCIS data for our trading partners, we're able to look at that data and gain insights into, product and the movement of that product, and help them determine, forecasting shortages, things of that nature, to ensure that the supply chain continues to move smoothly for them. And that's just one aspect. The other aspect is validation. We get a lot of people asking about, is my EPCIS valid? Is the data that I'm receiving matching things that, the product we've actually received, et cetera. And, there's a lot of questions about the validation of the creation of the EPCIS. And when you look at the EPCIS standards from GS1, the 1.2, RSpec 1.3, 2.0, the CBV documents that go with them to talk about how these are actually generated, and the schemas that it should follow. You're looking at multi-100-page documents, right? You take that into consideration with the documents from the FDA that you have to take into consideration on what needs to be provided, what needs to be sent. And, there's a lot of information and intelligence in there that can be often, a lot for one person to consume. This is one of those places where these automated systems can come in and, for lack of a better term, kind of learn what a good valid document looks like, what a good, regulatory passing document looks like. And then it can take that and say, hey, we've received 1,000 documents in the past hour, and I'm flagging these 10 as potentially, potentially wrong. Doesn't mean that they are, just means that they potentially are. Maybe you should take a look at them before you make any decisions or do anything with that product. Whereas, prior to that, it might have taken, a lot of man hours just to kind of validate and move forward on, that task.
Thanks, John. And so, the fairly blunt question, I guess, that I would pose to all three of you, and I would say, if you could give very, one or two sentences, and this won't be final thoughts necessarily, but just, if you were asked point blank and had to give a very brief answer, again, if I'm a manager of serialization or I'm the VP of supply chain, am I already too late if I'm not already utilizing or leveraging AI in my pharma serialization solutions? Is it something that I should be investigating but don't necessarily have to, budget significant dollars, let's say for this year in purchasing or prototyping, certain AI capabilities? Or is it something that I should definitely be aware of, but, maybe not just right now, right? It's something I need to keep tabs on for its potential future use, but it's not something I, again, should necessarily be spending a whole bunch of money on right now. So curious, Dimitar, John, if you just, what your thoughts would be on where I should be positioning myself across that spectrum.
Thank you, Scott. Definitely, my opinion is that you should be considering doing prototyping AI solutions for your supply chain. Uh, I think that this is the best approach currently because we are still waiting for the AI and regulations that should be affecting the pharma. What is possible, what is not possible. So throwing a bunch of money that for something that may be out of regulation, it will be just throwing money out of your company. So prototyping and throwing possible solutions, it's maybe the best approach as it is at this moment, and just to find out what can be used and what possible solutions you can implement for your company and for your use cases and the problems you would like to resolve and the business you would like to expand. The possibilities are unlimited. The use cases that I have mentioned are just a few of all of them, and we have discussed. So you should just try prototyping, experimenting, and maybe some trials of the agents that you currently use. And that's in general my opinion. You're not too late, of course, as I told you, as I think, because the regulations are expected to come out maybe in the middle of the year or maybe in the end. So you have some time to find out what will be the best for you.
Oh, I second that. I second what Dimitar said. It's not too late, especially from the traceability and the regulation side of things. When in doubt, I think clod it out, right? That's what people are doing right now. The tool, they're quite powerful enough that, anyone can sit and then start playing around with it and experience it by themselves, the accuracy of it, the use cases of it, and whatnot. Of course, one can't achieve the enterprise grade precision with that, but that is what I think can be achieved with bare minimum MVPs and prototyping. Not too late, but the journey is just started.
I'm also in agreement that it's not too late. This is a good time to do the investigation, right? And I say that because there's some very key things that we need to look for. Hallucinations are still very real with the data, so these processes are definitely things that should be investigated, researched, tested, and then if you implement them at an enterprise or production level, ensure that they don't completely replace your current processes, and that you still have some sort of manual checks and balances in place to ensure that the data is good. To go with that, it's very important that the technology leaders in these companies that you as a serialization manager would work with, continue to work hand in hand with like your CISO and your DevOps teams and your security teams, because you need to ensure that this regulated and very controlled data is not put into a compromised place where it's accessible to other actors within the industry. Providing you can almost think of the AI systems, in certain circumstances, they're like prodigal toddlers, right? They're incredibly smart, access to all kinds of information. But if you ask them, the question, they'll spill all of the beans and tell all of the secrets, just because, the correct security, boundaries were not put in place. So it's very important that is also, kind of, kept in line and taken into consideration as you move forward.
Well said, John. That's quite right.
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Scott. No, I was just going to say. I mean, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, right? And suggesting the prototyping, but there's something that is consistently missed here, and it's the same with serialization when it was implemented, right? It's those user requirements. Why am I implementing AI? We talk about efficiency, but against what business benefit? So I would say that while it's if you've got the money and the budget to invest in prototyping and pilot, you need to have a good reason why you're doing it.
And I think to build upon Justin's point, right, which is what I'll say first, right, in my personal opinion, refreshing right? To hear from all three of you representing sort of the vendor community in this sense, right? Refreshing to hear the what I'll say level of restraint, and I know we're going to definitely use the word responsibility, right? I think what's interesting though, right, and sort of the next question I would pose to and sort of open it up to the group is hearing that, you know, fairly consistent response of, you know, yes, you should be looking at it. You're not too late, but you also don't need to, you know, be putting the lion's share of your 2026 investment necessarily into AI. So me, again, as the manager of serialization, like I said, I get calls probably every other day from my vendor basically asking me why I haven't already signed the contract for their new AI module. And so what I'm trying to now sort of compare contrast in my brain, right, is I have my vendor who's pushing. You need to have this yesterday, right? But then I'm comparing that to the fairly consistent feedback we're hearing from this group, which is you definitely want to pay attention, but that doesn't mean you have to be, again, putting significant investment literally today, you know, into that. So to sort of, I guess, look at it the other way, what would be potentially some of the challenges and I guess really the best word is risks, right, of almost going too far too fast, right? From a vendor perspective, again, I'll come back to that word responsibility, right? And the fact we have three vendors, you know, on the podcast today. How do you see it as your responsibility, right, to sort of position yourself with your customer group when it comes to, again, the sort of the real push, if you will, to implement AI in the very near term? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. First of all, I think, when, again, we are role playing here, Scott, and you are the serialization manager. And if I, as a serialization sales guy, come and tell you, hey, why haven't you taken this AI module? You know, it's hypercritical, it's mission critical, the world is moving on. Your answer would be, I don't need it right now. My BAU remains unaffected if I don't take that AI module. It's that simple. My shipments are going through, my data exchange is happening. There is literally zero impact of those AI modules coming in from a regulatory compliance standpoint, right? That's what we are here for, right? Let's, if I uh, take 10 steps back, what all we are doing? We are just helping our customers stay compliant to traceability regulations. And on top of that, ultimately hope to prevent counterfeiting of the drugs, which, of course, we don't control the physical aspects of the supply chain. We can't control the counterfeiters who exist out there, who the criminals out there. But at least we are helping the customers follow that compliance to the T. We are doing this without using an AI module at the heart of it, at the core of it. So that's one. So, and now you look at me, right? See, I have been a person who dabbles in tech. I'm building an enterprise grade product. I'm selling to CIOs, CXOs. My company is is a very legitimate investor driven company. Everybody asks me, the world is moving on. What are you doing? Why don't you also put in these AI features and start monetizing them? I'm like, doesn't feel right at this stage. Of course, I'm not I'm not turning away or, turning a blind eye towards innovation, towards building something better. Of course, we are doing. My engineers are at it. We are exploring different use cases. We're exploring different AI tools. We're even exploring in-house LLMs to be built out, right? So that is me catching up to the innovation and knowing that, yeah, of course, let me find out the right solution, not just any solution to sell to the customer. So that is my position as a responsible vendor. That is my position, that I am keeping an eye on the innovations that need to be done and keeping an eye on the efficiency gains that I must give to my customers that I'm keeping an eye all the time saving that I must give to my customers if I'm selling an AI based module. If I'm not having a clear sense of that, if I'm not helping my customers achieve these metrics, then my brand image just goes for a toss. That's what will happen. That's me being a responsible vendor here, right? And we all know what kind of brand image a few legacy players have, and it is and I'll be very blunt about it, right? All the customers that I've met, they feel forced to go with a certain player. They feel forced, right? They know that it's not adding value. It's predatory in nature. They don't talk the nicest of the language. They are shoving up features right on our face and saying that it's compliance, you need it, there's no other option. And that's their brand image taking a hit. So being a responsible vendor out here, I would never risk AltiusHub's brand image taking a hit, because I don't want to be on the bad side of a customer. We are in an industry where the memory is very strong, right? It's the industry is cyclical in nature. People are very smart. People are clever. They know what as responsible vendors we are giving. So it's a matter of time, and certain unacceptable things that are there in the market, they will be kicked out.
I think Abiram, you bring up a really good point, and it is our job as vendors, and I think job of the vendors in the industry to make sure that we are the responsible vendors, right? And ensuring that the systems, tools, data that we provide is top tier. And as a supply chain manager, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's really important to work with your technical counterparts to ensure that the solutions and new technology that you implement across your systems is is one required, has that business case tied to it, but is also safe. So the things that you should be asking when that sales individual or that account rep for your service provider comes and talks to you about this new required system that is absolutely necessary. The questions are that you should be asking are why is it necessary? Where does this tie into regulation? What makes your system solve this problem? And specifically when it ties to AI, that's more generalized in nature. But when it comes to AI, you should be asking the question of what models does your system use? How are they trained? How does your system understand what my data is? Like what sort of and that's kind of where that training comes into play. What kind of training was done to ensure that you'll be providing me good data and not just hallucinations, right? And that's where bad answers, hallucination. Quick example: you ask it what's 2 + 2 and it gives you 5 as an answer. That's considered a hallucination. Bad answer for good input. And so you should be asking those kind of questions, because it also comes into play of, if they say, oh, well, we've got our own LLMs that we're training. It's, well, are you going to be utilizing my data in order to train your LLM to make decisions for other businesses? And what does your security team feel about that, right? Those are all things that you should ask. And ultimately, if all the boxes come back checked, one of the things that I would suggest to these supply chain managers is say, if you're really interested, ask to see if you can pilot it. Say, hey, for 3 months, give me access to the system at and then you work out the business details. I won't go into that, but pilot it for 3 months. See if it actually provides actionable intelligence and value to you and your business. If it does, fantastic. Find a way to scale and implement it. If it doesn't, then right now that solution is not good for you. It's not the time.
Well, my personal preference regarding the AI is taking one step at a time. If there is a trial, yes, I will take it as a customer and implement one feature at a time and take the safe approach. I wouldn't do a whole system at once. And
So start small. Is that what you're suggesting?
exactly, feel confident about it, feel confident about the data that you share, and once you're fully sure what is going on, we can take another bite and so on once we have full implementation. Of course, we should not forget the responsibility and the regulations. We are still waiting for the regulations and to know which is okay and which is not okay regarding the AI.
Yeah, no, and that's where I think now I'll sort of take my my role playing hat off, if you will, and maybe just give some sort of summary thoughts, because I think there's a lot of really important points and considerations, right, for that role I was playing, to really think about going forward. I think first and foremost, actually nothing to do with AI at all. I want to again just thank both Dimitar and John from SoftGroup and from Trust.med, obviously for your participation, but also specifically, right, for the fact that we have two vendors within the serialization space coming onto a common forum. Quite honestly, I've been doing this for 17 plus years. I'd say outside of panel discussions at trade shows, I'm not sure I've ever seen a forum where multiple vendors are willing to come on, share their thoughts, experiences, and obviously credit to Justin and Carolina for putting sort of this concept and approach together, because I know it's something that we're going to do a lot more as well, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it's all about what benefits the industry and the customers the most. And there's so many aspects of pharma serialization where there can be significant benefit, right, from vendors coming together and being collaborative and willing to share, right, and not just simply put up the competitive walls. So again, I give a lot of appreciation and thanks to the two of you for coming on to this session today, and I know I'm sure in future sessions as well. I think in terms of AI and this topic today, right, I mean, some really easy takeaways in my opinion. John, I love the fact, as you brought up, right? I think everybody has an experience with AI in their personal life. I use it every day, multiple times a day, and very familiar with it. Am absolutely amazed, right, at what it can do.
Yeah.
Again, for a lot of non-work related issues, but I think at the same time, gaining that experience of using AI for personal reasons is also sort of, I guess, exposed some of the concerns or risks that I personally have about its use in professional settings and business settings. One of which is just the consistency of responses. I know you talked about like hallucinations. That what I get concerned about is the fact that I can ask the same question 5 times to AI, and I might get 5 slightly different answers back, right? And that concerns me if I think about, well, if I wanted to now apply similar concepts to my serialization and traceability data, I need to make sure that if I ask it a specific question, I'm going to get the exact same answer back, every single time based on the data set that it's exposed to, has access to, and is sort of basing its response on. So, that's something, and I know that's probably just something that's a matter of time, and as capabilities grow and evolve, right? I know that's probably something that people see in a lot of different ways and experience, that same kind of, maybe I don't want to call it limitation, but just sort of inconsistency in many different ways. So that's one of it. And again, also personal opinion, the underlying data quality of what we have in pharma serialization, I think, is nowhere near ready for real significant value and benefit from trying to lay AI on top of it, right? I feel like the focus needs to be on improving data quality before we think we can just unleash, AI agents on top of that data and get real valuable output, from whatever you're expecting that particular AI agent to do. So that's just another concern I have. I think the last concern I have, again, actually isn't necessarily about AI directly, but more just generally the fact that we've seen this trend time and time again in the pharma serialization space, almost literally, at least here in the US, since the day that DSCSA was passed you've had this approach taken by many vendors, not putting SoftGroup and Trust.med into this bucket, right? But you've had many vendors who essentially have had to look for opportunistic areas, right, to basically either grow or bring in new revenue streams. We saw it from day one of DSCSA when the law passed and you had a handful of vendors who had already been supporting serialization for prior regulations, namely California e-pedigree, now have to do a complete shift because DSCSA was going to start with not serialized exchange, but just lot level, right? T3 exchange. So all of a sudden overnight, you had all these vendors magically turn themselves into EDI providers when they had never had any experience doing EDI in the past, right? That was just an opportunistic thing they had to pivot towards in order to basically keep, right, their businesses alive. You then saw it again with VRS, right? As the bubble, if you will, of the industry putting in their serialization systems was essentially bursting. Vendors needed a new capability to bring in more revenue. Welcome VRS into the equation. You then definitely saw it with blockchain, right? And blockchain is probably the closest and best comparison or parallel, I would think, to what I think, are seeing today with AI, right? Blockchain was supposed to solve everybody's problems, right? Every vendor put out marketing about how they're implementing and using blockchain. And again, today, you still have some use cases, some implementation, but by and large, we don't really see blockchain as a core sort of central component to, the L3, L4, L5 serialization systems that are being used across the industry today. And so that's one of my biggest concerns about AI. It might actually not even be about AI as a concept or technology itself. It's just, is it simply the next opportunistic thing that vendors are trying to push because they need revenue streams coming in, right? Because there's not, the bulk of the industry that are now purchasing serialization platforms. And so they just need to find a new way to bring in money. So I think all of that combined really leads me to the sort of final conclusion, which I think it is all about being responsible, right? I think the ability for vendors to take a responsible approach to AI is probably something we have never seen before, or I mean, it's more important than sort of how vendors have approached any other of these kind of capabilities in the past, right? Is this concept that vendors have a responsibility to bring AI features and capabilities to their customers in a responsible way that is considering obviously the value that it's going to deliver to them on a daily basis, but also is minimizing the potential risks, right? Be it security or otherwise, that come anytime you're introducing AI into an organization. And so that's, I think, what I appreciate the most from Dimitar and John from your organizations, right? Is I would consider you guys to be very responsible in how you're approaching AI. Not saying you have to sign up with us today, you have to cut checks with us today, but rather, educate yourself, do pilots, learn as much as you can about it, start small. Because I think those are the real indicators, right, of a responsible vendor versus somebody who's just being opportunistic looking for that next paycheck. So that's kind of my concluding points.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, definitely the AI is a new field for us too. We are currently, as a software company, using it a lot. Using it, of course, it's the first field that the AI came through because, software companies develop the AI to serve mostly software developers and software architects. And we have experience as users, and now we are deploying it we are planning to deploy it as a solution to our customers. And we are experiencing a lot of different issues and stuff, but we are also getting pretty good results. And definitely we're trying to do it on the safe side and to not bring any data that can leak. There are a lot of incidents around that we can look around, but definitely we don't want to step on this and create such issues with serialization and pharmacy data, because serialization is just part of the counterfeiting and to bring safe medicine to the patient. So it's a responsible job, and we don't want to mess up trying to do it fast and easy.
Well, serialization is an industry, though, isn't it? There's a whole industry being built up, and there are huge numbers of countries taking up serialization right now across the world, which means also, particularly in those that are doing the track and trace systems, there's huge amounts of change going through an industry, and it's interesting to hear you speak, and also hear John speak, because and as Scott quite rightly said, we do need responsibility. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of different vendors seeing that there's quite a big growth happening. I mean, Europe's been through its growth period. It's been operating. Next week it'll be operating for 7 years. But most other systems haven't been operating, and there is still a huge change to go through. Just with people connecting, as you found in DSC CSA, just connecting all the partners in the supply chain together, and to get them to work consistently and consistently with each other, and to pass data between each other that's of a high quality that everyone can read each other's data, is a huge task. If you then start to put in automation in there, which is what AI does, it automates tasks. Unless you really understand what you're doing first, putting in the automation, as Scott said earlier, you might get rubbish in, rubbish out. And I do echo what he said from both you, John, and you, Dimitar. You've come to this with some really good thinking here today, so thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. I know, from the Trust.med side, our kind of feelings and thoughts on it definitely align and mirror what Dimitar said with SoftGroup. You've got to do things, safely, and really, when it comes down to it, the biggest piece, I think, is the education of it all, right? You have to be educated in your decisions. You have to understand what you're utilizing. It is new technology. It's something, the idea might have been around for a minute, but when it comes down to actual modern day, everyday use cases, it's more of a new technology. And I think it behooves all of us to educate ourselves, whether you're the service provider providing a system out there, or the salesperson for that service provider selling it to your customer, or you're the customer looking at how can AI help me in my business. You really should educate yourself on what it can do, what is out there, what are the security concerns that other people have said that they have, and think about, does that apply to me, or what kind of concerns do I have when it comes to the ways that I want to utilize these AI-backed systems within my own environment. And not every, like Jerome said earlier, not every business has a CISO, or has someone who's tied into technological security for an organization, but hopefully you have someone who has some technical chops that you can go and sit down with if you're not the technical person, and say, like, hey, how can this system affect us? Can it share our data? If we're asking it questions, can someone abuse that in order to get answers we don't necessarily want them to have? I know there were car dealerships using AI agents, and people were prompting them in order to get discounts on vehicles and things like that, just as a funny anecdote. So it's things like that you've really got to educate yourself on.
Yes, I agree. I mean, and there's a huge amount of education going in, and that comes down to also people in businesses. Some businesses, I saw a presentation in November.
I think with the service providers that they are talking to, they should look for pilots, or service providers that can give them, at least short runways to evaluate the process. But they should also take a look at the actual contracts that are involved, ensure that proper SLAs and security are around the process, and they really should educate themselves on what's available, what the issue is that they're trying to solve, and if the solution that they're being provided or shown is actually there to solve that issue, and they're not just getting caught up in the, you know, the fire of a buzzword.
Yeah, I mean, and, and that is an important point, I think, right? That I definitely have belief and hope, right, in the concepts of AI in the long term. Right? I think that's the key part there. I just, right, I can't get on board with the I need to have it today because there are tangible solutions, right, that I can actually put my hands on today that are going to solve the fundamental challenges that I'm experiencing today, right? So I think that's an important clarification. Is it's not a disbelief in AI as a technology and as a concept. It's as everything we've talked about today. It's the timing, it's the education, it's the responsibility, right? It's what I think is maybe first correcting some of the underlying data challenges within pharma serialization, because that's going to be one of the keys to actually unlocking all of the, all of the hype that is today, all of the hype I think we hear about AI. I don't think that hype will ever be achieved if we don't first address the fundamental data challenges that we have, ongoing every day with pharma serialization. If my data, if the whole point of generally, not for every country, but right, if we think of generally the concept of serialization and traceability is to capture data that reflects what happened in the real world, the reality is we have so much data in pharma serialization and traceability that doesn't actually reflect what happened in the real world. And so to think that AI can magically know, based on looking at that data, what did actually happen in the real world, I think that's a pipe dream. So I think we got to fix the data challenges, but then I think there is the long-term, the long-term hope and value in AI concepts. Unfortunately, we have very much seen that historically, through pharma serialization and traceability, right? Sort of the taking advantage of hype and buzzwords to essentially create new revenue streams, because core business revenue, is something that spiked when everybody had to implement and purchase their serialization systems. But once that bubble burst, right, all of the vendors had to find ways to basically grow revenue without having a market, to simply grow. So blockchain, we've talked about, VRS, we've talked about. I mean, all of these things were pushed very, very hard by vendors, but didn't necessarily always turn out to be sort of the revolutionary concept or capability I think that the industry thought they were getting in the first place. And I think that's what we have to watch with AI. Again, it's not that the potential isn't there. It's that, do I really need to have this today? Or do I need to, have a bit of caution and hesitation, because there are a lot of risks, as I think we see across industries and across other use cases, right? There is a lot of risk that comes with AI from a security standpoint, from the consistency of results, things like that. So it's all about just making sure the industry approaches it, with a clear mindset, and not sort of be swayed by I think the marketing that we see from, again, some vendors that would make it seem like you have to have this today.
I think I'd agree.
Absolutely.
I think I'd agree with you there, Scott. I think you make some strong points, and I did like your taking the position in the actual podcast that we recorded of being an end user on the end of the proposals by software suppliers to encourage the three software suppliers to provide their inputs and their guidance. And I think what is really important in this is what you just said just now, is, do I really need this today? What's it going to deliver in terms of business value for me? What's the business scenarios that I need to fulfill? And is AI really the right tool there? And as we discussed on I think on the first time we recorded the podcast, there is this whole thing about, with AIs, with the hallucination that you can get with some AI tools. If you get rubbish in, you get rubbish out, and you don't get any business value out of it. So therefore, you need to trial it carefully. You need to make sure you understand where the risks are in implementing AI, but also what are the guardrails you need to put in place. And being in the life sciences and pharmaceutical industry, the whole concept of validation, working through from your scope and your requirements through a design, and then validating that design through various forms of testing, leading all the way up to the performance qualification, is something that's not going to go away. And just implementing AI because it's quick is not necessarily going to deliver that unless you have these other controls and guardrails in there. That's not to say that innovation can't flourish, and innovation can flourish, and AI is going to deliver a lot of innovation, but we do need to just keep the basics there too.
Definitely, and I think we're probably going to see a lot of people just take a gung-ho approach, right? And some people are going to take a reactive approach. Some people are going to feel I need to jump on the bandwagon. So there is reason for people to step back and just take a look at what others are going to do. So we are going to get, I guess, an idea of what fails, what doesn't. Things like the regulation, the guardrails that you outlined, Jerome. That's definitely something that's going to happen at some point, but it's probably going to happen as a result of somebody making a huge mistake, which is, to Scott's point, right? Make sure that the data that you've got is correct. And then come back to your point, rubbish in, rubbish out. So I think there's definitely going to be, what I'm saying is a phase of learning and a phase of mistakes that are going to invariably happen that are unavoidable.
Well, it's also making sure that you understand with your AI, and AI tools can be quite pervasive, as we discussed ourselves earlier today. If you don't have the right controls in place, the AI can go and get the data that it shouldn't have access to and access that and use it in whatever it's doing for you. So it does have to be controlled and managed quite carefully, in just the same way as you'd manage any other sort of application. But it does have the ability, the huge opportunities to create efficiencies. It is going to create change in your organization. It is going to create challenges around some roles, but it's also going to create opportunities for new roles and new ways of doing things, for new ways of innovation and automation, an opportunity to create real value and benefit within the business.
100%, absolutely. And it was good to hear the guys, give their perspectives, and the term that Scott's used so many times, showing responsibility. They all provided different instances where they were using AI. So yeah, there is valid cases for it, but equally they're taking a cautious and a systematic approach. They're not just making these promises. And I think Scott's correct that a lot of this is buzz. A lot of it is AI hype. A lot of it is to push for sales.
That's also the challenge as the customer, is to make sure you're asking the questions of your supplier to say, what are you going to do to make sure these other things and other controls and balances that I need in place, what are you going to do to make sure they're implemented? It's not just selling me something, selling me a license agreement, selling me a subscription, whatever you're selling me, because I don't want to find that I implement something, it does a great job, but actually costs me an arm and a leg, or a huge amount of money to keep it implemented, and then to actually operate it. And I know there are some stories of startups using AI tools that go onto the Amazon Web Services, deploy their solution, don't really understand it, and then end up with an absolutely enormous bill after the first month, which breaks the company. And so we need to make sure that these are the sorts of things that the supplier needs to take a responsible approach. And I did feel from the 3 suppliers we had, they all were taking a very responsible approach to AI and how it was deployed. And I guess that's what you need to look for when you're looking for a supplier of AI into serialization.
Yeah, and I would second all of that, and especially the point as you raised, right? I mean, I think it should be celebrated, for those vendors in particular that came on, and as you said, I think demonstrated a very responsible approach to all of this. Maybe the clearest sort of scenario to me that would demonstrate a vendor really taking that responsible approach would be, well, let me say it this way. We hear so much about or what we see a lot, I think, again, with the marketing, with the hype, what's sort of being promoted and presented to the pharma serialization space from vendors is very much about, here's how AI is going to make your life, you being the customer, right? Here's how it's going to make your life better, right? So it's all about leveraging the concept of AI on your data to somehow improve whatever it is, they're going to claim that the AI is going to improve. How interesting would it be if instead we see a vendor take the position, hey guys, look, we're using AI internally within our business, right, within our operation, and we're able to, save however much money from our use of AI, that we now want to pass those savings on to you, right? I mean, to me, that would be the most clear demonstration of a responsible vendor, because basically the vendor is taking the risk on themselves first, right? To say, look, we're not talking about trying to sell you AI. We're actually going to show you how how we're using AI ourselves to improve our business, which sort of secondhand can then improve, the customer's
It's
life.
what you call a practice what I preach approach.
Exactly, right.
So I've done
now,
it to myself, and so therefore I can talk to you from experience of having done it to myself, what works and what doesn't work.
Yep, and again, unfortunately, I don't think we're seeing that yet, but that to me would be a very eye-opening experience, right? I think if we do see vendors maybe take that approach, right, which is, look, AI, a lot of potential, so therefore we've actually started to use it ourselves, and can turn around and give you the benefit of us, taking on that initial risk, rather than AI is this amazing thing that we're going to try to sell you, so you actually pay us more, but you take on all the risk, right, of the use of that AI. So, I hope there's vendors out there that might consider that and take that approach, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been Decommission, the Serialization Podcast, and we will speak to you soon.